Ken, did you live in Enfield when you first came to the football club?
Yes, I lived in Enfield, only about a mile and a half from the ground, so it was quite a nice walk across I walked across the playing fields actually.
And what was the first match you attended that you remember?
Well, I'm not absolutely certain because we went to games sporadically, but I am sure that, because I found an entry in my diary, that I went to a match against Hertford Town. Now that might have been because my father came from Hertford and he wanted to see his team, but Enfield actually won 8-1 that day, and I gather that Lawrence got 5 goals, so it was quite special. And my memory is of the ball going into the net. It kept on going in, you know, you could, as though the ball couldn't be kept out of the net, and everyone said it was Lawrence, another one from Lawrence, so it was quite exciting really.
Why did you go in the first place?
Well, I went with my father. I think my mother very rarely went, but my father was a great Tottenham Hotspur supporter, and I think when I was fairly young he didn't want to take me to the cauldron of football of Tottenham, so we went to the more gentle scene of Enfield, and that was why. And I think in a way I got so keen that I persuaded my dad to follow Enfield more than Tottenham in later days.
And do you still live in Enfield?
No, I now live in Oxford. I moved out in the mid-70s.
Why did you keep coming back to the club?
I came back, well, to be honest, I think I came to watch Enfield more latterly because I saw that they were doing well and it looked like it would be good fun to watch them. So I travelled from Oxford to Enfield fairly often, more often for cup games, because I felt that in the FA Cup and the FA Trophy the most exciting matches often occurred.
And what does football mean to you?
Football, well, football's a beautiful game. I know it's a cliche, but when it's played well, it's fascinating. It can be heartrending when your team loses, or when your team wins. It's a great feeling. But I like to try and keep a bit of a neutral view and just see both teams as going out there enjoying themselves. So.
And who was or who is your favourite player?
For Enfield, you mean? My favourite Enfield player? Very difficult because there are so many good ones. I mean, I'd be tempted to say Tom Lawrence because he was so phenomenal both as a player and as a manager afterwards. He did extremely well. I had a soft spot for quite a lot of players. I mean, in latter years, obviously Noel Ashford was a very good player, and Keith Barrett and Steve King. I think ultimately my favourite player might be Steve King because he was so loyal for so many years, and also he was such an exceptional player, great skill, and I don't think he was ever booked. I don't remember ever seeing him booked. So he was one of those Bobby Charlton, Stanley Matthews type players in a way. So I think I'll opt for Steve King as my favourite player.
What are your memories of Southbury Road?
Well, how long have we got all night? So my memories of Southbury Road are many, and I suppose you want me to pick out a few highlights. I remember a game against Reading, a cup game, when Enfield lost the replay after they fell behind and came back, and then lost in extra time, I think.
What was your favourite away ground to visit?
Away ground. I used to like visiting Walthamstow Avenue. I don't know why. Partly because it was fairly close, and partly because it was kind of small, compact ground, and you felt kind of safe and homely there. There weren't any riotous supporters, as far as I could see. Whereas going to Leytonstone, That was an interesting ground. I don't know if you remember it. You had a huge bank on one side and a tiny strip on the other, and there was a railway. A bridge ran right near the ground, and there were some great games there because Enfield and Leytonstone were very evenly matched, and usually they were 0-0s or 1-1s as I recall, but always exciting games.
Did you go to many away games, Ken?
I didn't go to as many away games as some of my friends, but I went to a few. I went to more, I think, in the latter period in the 80s when I was a bit older, obviously, and where I lived meant that I could go up north or go to the West Country more easily than say, if I were living in Enfield. So I went to places like Yeovil, Trowbridge, Kidderminster. I went up to Barrow. I think that was the farthest I ever went for a game. Peterborough. Yeah, lots of grounds I went to.
What do you remember going to Wembley to watch them in the cup finals?
What did I say?
What do you remember going to Wembley to watch them in the cup
well,
finals?
There were. There were 6 trips to Wembley altogether. I went to every one. The first one was a very sad affair when Enfield lost to Crooktown, having had their goalkeeper injured, and it all seemed a bit unfair. And I was quite young at the time, and I was quite tearful, I remember. But I think I grew out of that later. And then there was Skelmersdale in '67, which was, I thought, a good game, but it was a bit cautious, and it ended in a very exciting manner when Enfield saved a penalty in the last minute of extra time, and then they won the replay, of course. 1970 was probably the best performance, 5-1 win against Dagenham, which it was as good as that, really. They played extremely well throughout the game, and Dagenham were a good side, and yet they didn't have any answer, so that was great. The 72 was lost to Hendon 2-0. They were a good team then, but not a great team, and Hendon were better, and it was a fair result. No complaints on that one. And then the 2 trophy finals were both good. One was a 1-0 against Altrincham. It was a close game, a bit like the Skelmersdale in '67, except that Enfield happened to get the 1 goal, which was completely out of the blue, a long distance shot from Paul Taylor, if I remember. And one thing about that game I remember is that Steve Oliver was the captain, and he ushered Tony Jennings up to get the cup, whereas it was his privilege to get it. And this was a noble gesture to Tony Jennings, who played more games for Enfield than any other player, I think. He was a great senior figure for Enfield, so that was good. And then '88 they played Telford. That was another one of these tense 0-0 draws, if I remember rightly. But Enfield won the replay. So.
Did you go to either of the Barnsley matches?
Yes, I went to both Barnsley matches. They were very exciting, certainly. Yes, the first game, it was great to be in a packed arena. It must have been 30 or so thousand at Barnsley. Barnsley were doing very well. Norman Hunter was the manager at the time. And Enfield shocked them, I think, by how well they played. And it was a really even game. And if it was a neutral they didn't know, you wouldn't know which division, so you would imagine that 2 teams were from the same division. And Enfield were unlucky to concede the first goal when the goalie carried the ball out of the penalty area when he was going to kick it. You very rarely see that, and when it does happen, it's nearly always overlooked, and yet this one occasion it wasn't, and Barnsley scored from the free kick. And then, of course, in the dying seconds, it was still 1-0, and Enfield threw one last attack, and of course they scored in the very last minute, which was fantastic. Peter Burton got that. And the replay at Tottenham was a very big crowd. It was about 30,000, I think. And Enfield lost 3-0, but Enfield hit the woodwork 3 times, and it wasn't really a fair reflection. But I guess the professionalism came in when Enfield were pressing forward to get a goal back, and of course they broke away and scored, that kind of thing. But it was great. It was very good. Yeah.
How did you feel about the old club losing Southbury Road as a ground?
Well, of course, it was tragic, really, because it was a good ground. It was. It had potential to be made bigger and better, and of course, so many games have been played there, and there wasn't another ground in Enfield anything like as good. So I felt it was. Well, it was certain people stood to gain by it, and they cared more about gaining than about football, and or indeed about the people of Enfield who enjoyed going to see. I mean, a lot of people went to the big games, didn't go every week, and yet I think they liked having Enfield Football Club there so that they could go along when they were free and it was a big game or something. So Enfield lost that, so it was very sad.
And if there was one match that you could watch from start to finish just to replay from your time watching Enfield, what would you pick?
I do remember a 4-4 draw between Enfield and Barnet in the FA Cup once. I remember, I think Enfield went 3-0 down in about 10 minutes. It was a ludicrous opening, and of course they were a bit depressed about that. I think they got one back before half time, so it was 3-1 at half time. And then second half they started playing well and got 2 more, and it was 3-3. And then Barnet scored again. And I think Enfield got a last-minute equaliser, so that was exciting. But I think Barnet won the replay, so...
Yeah, nothing wrong with your memory on that, yeah. Barnet won the replay 3-0. Yeah.
So how did you become interested in football?
I became interested in football, I suppose, because there was this mysterious thing on television when I was about 5 years old called the football results. And, you get... some strange name and then a number, and then a name and then another number, and I found that absolutely fascinating. I wanted to know what it was all about, and then I guess I picked up the idea that you kick the ball around and try and get it in the goal. So yeah, and going to matches obviously was exciting, and going to Enfield was exciting. So that's how I got into football.
What's your earliest memory of football? Did you play at school?
Well, I played at school, but yeah, I got in my school primary school team, which was there were 15 boys, and I had to pick 11, so it wasn't too difficult a task to get into the team. And then at the grammar school, I did play occasionally, but I wasn't all that good as a player, to be honest. So, but I love watching the game. The World Cup, I think the World Cup in '66 was a great eye-opener because it was the first time that it had been on TV, and you saw players you never heard of before and who were doing incredible things with the ball and things. So that was good.
So what's your best football memory and why?
Well, I think maybe in the 1967 Wembley final, there was that moment at the end when the penalty was given, and I was so depressed because it looked like they were going to lose again. And then, of course, the great save at the last minute. That was probably the most ecstatic moment I remember.
So what was your worst football memory and why?
Worst football memory? I suppose it was losing the final in 1964 when I was quite young, and there were so many high hopes. It was very disappointing that day.
Have you made good friends from being an Enfield football fan?
Well, probably. I mean, I've kept up with a lot of friends who I knew anyway. I suppose, to be honest, not that many. But I mean, I've met Graham Foss, for example, and that's a nice thing to do. So, yeah.
What do you think of Enfield today in terms of football and as a place?
That's a good question. What do I think of Enfield now? Well, as a place, although I don't live here now, I do get the feeling that some of the facilities that Enfield had when I was younger have disappeared, like cinemas, for example, football ground, obviously, swimming pool. So that's sad for the people of Enfield. As regards football, Well, I think it has taken and will still take many years before the football team, hopefully there'd only be one football team, not two, and then that team would reach the heights that Enfield reached in the 60s, 70s and 80s. I hope it will happen one day, but it's a little way to go yet. Well, I was pleased to be asked to take part in this project because it potentially brings back to life the good times that were had by so many people following Enfield, and not merely for nostalgia, because it might enable people to sort of catch on to that feeling now and sort of go ahead and enjoy themselves in the same way that we used to in those days. Yeah, I think this project could help children or any person really who's interested in football, and I suppose on television we get so much of Premiership and European football, and it's great to watch that quality of play, but you don't get the atmosphere of being in a live ground and watching actual real flesh and blood people make mistakes and improve on, they're not already the finished article, but and maybe some of them go on to great things like some Enfield players did in the past. So I think it would be very good if more people watched live football, even at not at the top level, but at a more grassroots level. Yeah.